Bruce Arian said this. Bruce Arians, head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, said this about Mike Evans.
With him being the best receiver on this team, why isn't Byron making a more concerted effort of getting Mike involved in the passing game earlier?
Mike was open a bunch in that ball game. He just didn't get targeted. That's all. He was open. Mike was open.
Okay, so what's he saying? What do you think he's saying? Mike was open. The ball wasn't thrown to him. That's not a Byron Leftwich. That's not a Mike Evans. That's a Tom Brady issue. Right? And here we are again with Bruce Arians, who's always been a guy who speaks the truth, right? From his perspective, like he speaks the truth. And if you remember the last time they played the Saints, Bruce Arians was like, look, we prepared him for all the things that we saw. He didn't play all that well. What are the big wins that they have this year? The Packers is their biggest win. The story of that game is not Tom Brady. The story of that game is the defense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how they came back being down 10-0 with a pick six, and they were in Aaron Rodgers' kitchen all day long. Bruce Arians is simply saying what we have said, which is Tom Brady is not an elite quarterback anymore. And if anything, kind of holding them back a little bit from being who they want to be. Now, look, can we be critical of the play calling, which is not that underneath stuff that he feasted on for most of his career in New England? Sure, of course we can. That's fair. That's not unfair in any way. But it's also important to point out that, look, man, when you got guys open and you have coaches calling plays to get their star players the ball, and the star players aren't getting the ball, and everybody's wondering why, and you have this superstar in terms of name quarterback, and you're trying to figure out why it all ain't all working, maybe it's because you're dealing with old information. Who have they beaten this year? The Packers, the Raiders, the Giants, the Broncos, the Chargers, the Panthers. Do a little research. That's two teams with an above 500 record. Okay. The Packers game, it was an absolute ass whooping after being down 10-0. And the Raiders game, they put up 21 in the fourth quarter, and some of that is Brady, but a lot of that was their defense. And with that in mind, it's really important to point out that Tom Brady is just not who his reputation tells you he should be. In many ways, this is like, look, LeBron is going to get to this point. We've already seen some of it where LeBron defers to Anthony Davis and saves up that energy. The difference is it's really hard to do if you don't have a running game to save up that energy for when we need you. But Bruce Arians is right. Tom Brady needs to be better, or they're not going to achieve what their talent would lead you to believe they could achieve. And this, even for the best of them, is how it always ends. People forget John Elway won 2 Super Bowls at the end of his illustrious career. And anybody who wants to tell me that John Elway wasn't an all-time absolute stud great, you're kidding yourselves. You're like, well, they got blown out twice in the Super Bowl. They shouldn't have been in those Super Bowls, if not for a little luck and John Elway. He was so good that he carried his team to a higher level than their actual talent was, and then it got exposed in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady was that good. You know, there's a reason that guys don't play till they're 43 years old, right? We do understand that. There's only so much avocado ice cream and elasticity training, and even Tom House's, he joined us yesterday. Well, you can still throw a football at 43 years old. Like, there's a reason that guys don't do it. It's not because they all get knocked. Kurt Warner quit because his wife saw him get hit so hard it would cause any wife to tell you got to shut it down. Brett Favre couldn't complete passes anymore. He wasn't the same guy. Why do you think they all quit? It's not just Troy Aikman and the number of concussions sustained. That's some of it. Most part is like you just start to lose it. You're not the same guy. The Bucks are 5-3 this year. 5-3. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Not just on paper, statistically and otherwise. So if you have a great defense, okay, and if you have good skill position players, and if your coach is known as an offensive savant and a quarterback whisperer, and you're only 5-3, and you can tell me how good the NFC South is, I'm sitting there going like, okay, Atlanta's not good. They already fired their coach. Carolina's in rebuild mode. And the other good team, the Saints, have beaten you twice. You tell me, show me. You've played 4 games against teams with an above 500 record, and you're 2-2 with a very good defense. That's very well coached. You know, one of the things that was always great about the Patriots and Belichick and Brady is accountability. All great coaches have it. It doesn't always have to be public. It can be private, and it doesn't matter otherwise. But all that Bruce Arians is saying is, look, what do you want me to tell you? Our superstar quarterback, the most accomplished quarterback in the modern history of the sport, maybe any history of the sport, isn't as good as he needs to be and isn't maybe as good as his reputation would tell you that he is. And it's altogether possible that while both Brady and Belichick are a good part of are together important in the success of the Patriots, the downfall of the Patriots was not just the personnel of the wide receivers. Right? That's one of the things that has not been discussed. The Patriots were a good team last year, not a great team last year. And all anybody can say is, well, it's because they didn't have good enough skill position players. Could that include quarterback? There are bands that put out albums late in their band life, which is not nearly as good as all their other albums. There are comedians who are not as funny as they used to be. We've pointed out actors that cannot carry a scene or carry a movie the way they used to. It's not ageism. It's realism. It's reality. There is a shelf life for just about any product. Although I will point out that I tried to explain to one of my family members the other day that pickles don't really have a shelf life. Like, yeah, but there's a date on them when you're supposed to throw them out. Things were pickled in ancient times so that they wouldn't go bad. Pickles are not going bad when unopened in the back of your refrigerator. I can't have this argument. Outside of pickles and maybe beef jerky and Spam, everything else, Twinkies, cockroaches, wrestlers, right? Everything else will not survive the Holocaust. Everything else has a born-on date and a throw-out date, and that includes superstar quarterbacks. You may not like how Bruce Arian says it, but he's saying what needs to be said. It doesn't mean that what Tom Brady has accomplished isn't great. It doesn't mean that he doesn't look amazing for 43. It doesn't mean that he can't play in the NFL, that he's a bum, that he's washed up, that we get rid of him, and that you roll out the backup. It doesn't mean any of that. But you can say that he's not what he used to be and not what he needs to be. And that if we're going to cast blame, let's not put it on the former quarterback who's the new coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Instead, place it where it needs to be placed, on the shoulders of TB12.